Your words are a window to your soul. You can tell the position of someone's heart and their relationship with the Lord based on their words. Now, Jesus taught us this principle. He taught it to his followers. In Luke chapter 6, verse 45, Jesus said it this way: the good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of the evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. Now, don't confuse this. Don't overthink this. The formula is pretty simple. It's laid out pretty common. If you have good in your heart, you will speak good words. If you have evil in your heart, you will speak evil words. What would your words reveal about you? But now let me ask a more pointed question. What have your words revealed about you? What have people decided about you because of what you've said? You see, people should be able to know and tell that you're a lifelong follower of Jesus just by listening to your interactions. If they hear you at a restaurant, or if they sit by you in class, or they run into you at the mall, or you're working in your office, whatever it is, if you should be able to know from your words if you're a follower of Jesus Christ. Even people who are not in a conversation with you, just people who are eavesdropping or randomly hear you comments from the side, they should know that you follow Jesus. They should be attracted to Jesus because of what you say. 2022, a Pew Research study revealed that 64% of Americans identify themselves as Christians. That means of the 336 million people in the United States, about 215 million people identify as Christians. 64% of everything that happens in America is Christian. Aren't you glad that 64% of all words used reflect Jesus Christ today in America? Even better than that, aren't you glad that 64% of all social media posts are pleasing to the Lord and honor him? I think you guys know this. One of the biggest reasons unchurched people stay away from church is Christians who don't talk like Christians. Christians whose so-called faith hasn't actually made it to their mouth yet. You see, a follower of Jesus should sound different. We should sound different than the other world. When you're happy, you sound different. When you're angry, you sound different. When you're excited, you sound different. When you're disappointed, you sound different. Followers of Jesus sound different when they win, and they sound different when they lose. When you're treated unfairly, the words that come out sound different from other people. When someone makes a mistake, you sound different. When someone around you fails or sins or gets in trouble, your response sounds different from other people in the world. And when you're talking about other people, the words you use as a follower of Jesus Christ sound different. And when someone hurts you, the words that follow next sound different from the rest of the world. You see, if your relationship with Jesus is genuine, it should affect your speech. Others should be able to hear it in your words in any and every situation. James was one of the early leaders of the church, one of the first followers of Jesus Christ, very closely connected to him. He's also wrote one of the first instructions, one of the first letters ever written to the whole church. We know that as the book of James. And James understood this is so important right out the get-go. One of the very first things that we all talk about and learn together is James knew it was super important that we get speech right. And he knew not only was this the early part of the church, but also the period of time we're going to face intense persecution. The whole world would be introduced to this man, Jesus, and what the church is. So we had to get this part right, because not only would they see, they would be hearing what the church said. The portion of Scripture we're about to read is so confrontational, it will probably make you uncomfortable. Speech was so important in the first century that James clearly and directly addresses it. But speech is also one of those things that American Christians in the 21st century need to get right as well. With all the hate and the bad speech that's taking place in our current culture, that's why it's so important for us to get this right. American Christians, sadly, have decided that this is one of those areas where the Bible can't really mean what the Bible says. Somehow we've rewritten this whole section in our minds to justify our bad behavior. But our goal as a church is to be a biblical church, because the Bible is our guidebook for living. And we want you to be a biblical Christian. I want to be a biblical Christian, which means the Bible is the authority for my life. It should be the authority for your life. The Bible is where you go to learn how to lead your family. It directs what you believe. It instructs you on how to act, think, and even to speak. And so what does James tell us? In James chapter 1, verse 26, if anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself, and his religion is what? Worthless. That's pretty clear. If you claim to be religious, if you claim to be spiritual, but you can't control your tongue, and if I believe if James was living today and he was with us, he says, if you can't control your tongue and you can't control your fingers when you're typing on a keyboard or your thumb when you're posting on your phone, your religion, your church attendance is worthless. In other words, you aren't a genuine follower of Jesus Christ because your words invalidate your faith. Now, when we hear that, we say, wait, hold on a minute. That's not me. I mean, come on. I mean, you don't understand. Like, I get it, the general principle, but like, we come up with all the reasons why this doesn't apply to us. You say stuff like, I said that, but you didn't hear what they said about me. I'm just responding. Or, I know I probably shouldn't say this. I know it's gossip, but technically it's true, so I'm just saying what's already out there. I'm not saying it, I'm simply sharing on my page what they said. Or, you know what, I can't help being negative. I mean, that's just my personality. It was modeled to me. That's just who I am. Or that's, you know what, you got to excuse that behavior. That's just her. She's always talking bad about somebody. She doesn't really mean it when she says what she says. Not long ago, I was with a group of people and somebody said something incredibly cruel and hurtful to me. It deeply hurt. And obviously our response, they'd realized what they said they shouldn't have. When it was over, we were walking away from that, the parking lot, a person came up to me and said, man, hey, I hope you weren't hurt. You know, I didn't mean what I said. I just said it. That's just kind of what I do to joke around. I'm kidding. And then they followed up with this next deal because then they spun their hurt back on me because then they looked at me and said, you're just too sensitive. Like, nobody else is bothered by this. It's just part of weak culture. You just need to get over it. Or they come in and they say, I use emotion when I communicate. You got to get past the emotion and hear what I'm saying. I don't actually mean it. I just got a temper. So just dial it back. You see, you make excuses for the radical disconnect between your faith and your words. But James tells us there is an intrinsic connection because your words prove your faith or they invalidate your faith. Because if that device existed, if every word you said was replayed, what would it sound like? If someone had to make a decision about Jesus Christ based solely on the words that you had said all week long, Your conversations, would they want to follow Jesus? Would they want to become a Christian? Would someone listening consider you a follower of Jesus? And again, you say, Randy, is that really serious? I mean, come on. Words, really? You see, words aren't neutral, because your words either point people to Jesus or point away from Jesus. Now, that's pretty heavy. And I can feel a little bit of the tension in the room. If you don't, that's what that is. And let's just lean into that for a second. Let's just pause. See, your mouth and your posts could be the reason someone decides to walk away from Jesus. And I'm concerned Christians have somehow forgotten the price of their loose, damning words. When you mouth off to a waiter at lunch, or you post something in anger about people and sinful behavior, or just something you don't like, or someone else posts something where they express their opinion, and your response is to post a reply in a hateful, condescending manner. When you use profanity just to fit in, because that's what everybody does. When you use gender or race as the punchline of a joke to get a cheap laugh at the expense of someone else. When all you do is criticize your spouse in front of others, or you talk bad about your kids. When someone at work accomplishes something, gets a promotion, does something good, and your response is to degrade them or knock them down so that you will feel better about yourself. You see, your words are powerful, and they have lasting effect. Proverbs 18:21 says, the tongue has the power of life and death. Now, here's the positive side of it. Your words could be key to bringing someone to Jesus. There's a price for your loose words of death, but there's a reward for intentional words of life. When you encourage and you bless the waiter at lunch after church, when you post an encouraging comment on the post of someone who expresses they're hurting, when you intentionally find qualities in others to brag on, uplift, or praise, when you speak well of others publicly, when you write them notes of encouragement, when you express your love and care for your kids and your spouse, when you text, I love you, when you choose your words carefully, when you see every interaction as an opportunity to point people to Jesus, you harness the power of life-giving words. Because here's a frightening reality when it comes to words. You can't take them back, because words have lasting power. Key words at key times will never be forgotten. That's true for both good and for bad. I remember Coach Treat telling me in the 10th grade basketball gym at Bryant High School that I would never amount to nothing and I was worthless. Early here at First Assembly, I was brand new pastor. I remember standing in a kitchen hallway by the coffee machines and a guy telling me in that moment, you'll never be a good leader, and then saying I wasn't allowed to speak to him anymore. I remember those moments very clearly. I have tried to forget them, but I can't. And you get it, because you have a horrible memory too. Some of you right now, you have no idea where your keys or your phone or your car is. But you remember exactly what your teacher told you in 8th grade 42 years ago. And you replay what your dad has spoken to you repeatedly. You can't forget it. You've tried. I remember the hurtful words people spoke to me, but I also remember the loving, encouraging, caring words that people expressed. I remember the words that Randy Dorsey spoke to me at Arkansas Youth Camp in July 1994. It was a Thursday afternoon. He came up to me and he handed me some notes about ministry. I was 18, 19 years old. And he said, Randy, you'll be a great preacher someday. And turned around and walked away. I remember Heidi and I were here visiting North Little Rock, Arkansas. Weren't really sure about what was happening next in our lives. We had an opportunity to come be a part of First Assembly staff. Weren't really sure what we should do. And a gentleman who I deeply respected, a prophet in my life, a man named Byron Klaus, stopped what he was doing, looked at me and said, Randy, you'll never be happy until you're doing this. Last year when Pastor Parker and JT and I were trapped and stuck in Sudan, the very first morning, we hadn't been able to communicate to anyone virtually at all. I just a brief, maybe 3-sentence conversation with Heidi on the phone telling her we were trapped and there was no way out. We were really terror-filled at that moment. On the very first day, one of the very first texts that I received from Heidi included the words, our story is not over. And I read that text multiple times every day. Because I bet you're the same way. I bet you also can replay the positive, incredible, faith-filled, joy, love-filled moments that people have said to you. A whole bunch of our staff here at First Assembly, we keep the loving, encouraging notes and emails that you send to us. The closet in my office is decorated with years of notes that some of you in this room have sent to me and told me things. Almost all of us have a folder or a file filled with these notes. I got my folder out to bring up here on the stage yesterday. It was so big and so thick, it would have poured all over the stage. So I grabbed 4 of them, completely random. I've got a note from Michael and Becca Winslow about 5 or 6 years ago thanking me for being the pastor in their life. June 2nd, 2004. Dorothy Murray wrote me a note after I preached a sermon where she compared me to her husband, George. She also included a cartoon from Blondie. I think that's always a nice touch, but a young adult took time to write me I actually have 5 or 6 of these from him, telling me the impact that I've made in his life and journey and how important I was to him. I even have the drawing of Jack that he painted for me in a sermon when I was preaching. I'm not sure what sermon it was that I wore shorts when I spoke, but why would you keep something like this? It's because they mean something. Their words are powerful. They're deep. I've got a card from 2004 that I've probably read 100 times now. Your words of hate will be remembered forever, but your words of love and encouragement and grace and care will also be remembered. And I'll just say this as an aside. Our digital age is wonderful, but maybe some of us should rediscover the power of a pen and a card to document and keep. James continued. He said in James chapter 3, verse 1, not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. Now, of course, teachers who use words, lots of them, will be judged more strictly because they have more words. But I want you to make sure you don't miss that. He says more strictly. You see, all of us will be judged for our words. And it's an important truth. You are accountable for your words. Hey, Randy, that's not what it really means. I mean, how in the world could God judge me for all my words? Have you heard me? I got a bunch of words. Well, if you thought James is tough, let me introduce you to my friend Jesus, because he was even more straightforward. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 36, he said this, I tell you that man will have to give an account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Jesus said every word. He said you'll be acquitted, which means declared not guilty, or condemned, which means pronounce judgment against. Your words are not spoken in a vacuum. One day, all of us will stand. You will stand before God to give account for all your words, including your careless ones. And on that day, what will your words reveal? When your tape is played, when your recording is blasted, will you be found guilty or innocent? And if you really believe the Word of God, that passage should have shook you up. It had that effect on me. But notice what else happens in this Bible. Matthew 12:36, I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they have spoken. Verse 37, for by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned, which tells us that whatever reason, whatever excuse that you've had as to reason why you say what you say won't work. You see, you can't blame your upbringing. Your mom or dad's words won't be used against you. Your words will be used. You can't say, well, that's just who I am. That's my heritage. That's my culture. That's the way we talk to each other. That's the way my family communicates. That's what I learned. God, you can't hold this against me. That's just who I am. No, God, you know what happened. Come on, God. I mean, you know what's taking place. And you definitely can't say, well, God, you know my heart, because he does. You are accountable on earth. And one day you'll stand before God and give account for every word you've spoken. Here's how Eugene Peterson in The Message says it. Verse 36, he says, let me tell you something. Every one of these careless words is going to come back to haunt you. There will be a day of reckoning. Words are powerful. Take them seriously. Words can be your salvation. Words could also be your damnation. And I'm pretty sure at this point could probably just stop the sermon, the message, ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. And any of you who have problems with your words, come forward and, well, all of you would meet me up here. Because this is very convicting. So let me back up before we leave and share with you a little bit of hope of what we need to do next. Because James kept talking. James 3:7, he says, all kinds of animals, birds and reptiles and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man. But no man can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil full of deadly poison. And you're like, see, great, thanks. I can't even do it if I wanted to. But I don't think that's what that means. I think what James is saying, no man can tame the tongue. On your own, you can't do this. This isn't like some sort of New Year's resolution. This year I'm going to talk better about people. You don't have the capacity to change. You absolutely need help. And this is the principle. You need God's help to control your words. And thank God his help is available. My prayer for us, my hope is that our words, that your words will reveal us as to be followers of Jesus Christ. Just for a moment, let's do an experiment. Let's just imagine and dream for a moment. Let's dream of a church. What would a church look like that really got this? I mean, wouldn't it be amazing if you came to church and you knew that everyone you were going to run into was going to say something good about you? Wouldn't it be awesome if that you knew every interaction you would have, someone would encourage you and bless you and say nice things to you? You would come to church and you would purposely run into someone just so simply they could say something nice to you. Wouldn't it be awesome if you knew that every time you came to church that they were cheering and rooting for you? If you messed up or failed, they were the first ones to pick you up and say, it's going to be better, you're going to move forward. If you were succeeded, life was successful, they would be the ones with signs in the parking lot and cheering, saying, look at what they did, look how amazing it was. Wouldn't it be refreshing to come to church and know that everyone would be blessing you, that constantly there would be blessing? There would be no arguments in the parking lot, no fighting over seats, no comments on coffee. Everybody would just be happy. Can you imagine a place where everyone allowed their faith to make it to their mouth and became words of blessing? If that happened, you wouldn't miss a weekend. You'd come to every service. And there'd be a line out the door waiting for people to come in to hear about God and to be blessed by others. That's the kind of church I want to be a part of. That's the kind of church I want to attend. And I think that's the kind of church God intended for us to have. Now, when you hear a message like this, you know what your tendency is? You listen and you say, wow, I sure hope she's listening to him. In fact, a couple of you while I was speaking, I saw you. You looked down the road just to see if they were, I saw you, I know who you are. Or you're like, man, he should have been here today because he needed to hear this. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and just send him a link to the YouTube channel and the podcast because I'd really like for him to listen to this. That's your tendency. You think someone else needs this, and I sure hope they're listening. But the kind of church we just dreamed about together doesn't start with someone else. It always starts with you. It starts with me. My relationship with Jesus Christ, my words matter. Because James said it this way: if anyone considers himself religious, spiritual, if anyone considers himself a good church-going person, and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself, and his religion, spirituality, his church-going is worthless. So if you're feeling pretty bad right now, that's called conviction. That's God whispering in your heart, speaking to you, saying, hey, this is an area you got to fix. If you're like, okay, so how do I do it? Well, that's the reason why we're doing this series. Today is the start of the next several weeks where we're going to look at how we as a church and we as individuals can change the way we talk. We're going to walk through 5 questions, 5 essentials to build a grid of what we need to do. Let me introduce it to you today. First, we're going to ask the question, is it true? Is what I'm about to say true? Is it based on facts, or is it based on feelings, or is it based on opinions? Is what I'm about to say true? And then we're going to move to this next question. Is it helpful? Is what I'm about to say helpful to the person I'm saying it to? Could be true, but will it help? Third, is it inspiring? Your words can either build people up or tear them down. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, you should be building others up. This next question is so important. Don't miss any of it, but don't miss this week. Is it necessary? Because things can be true. It might be helpful and inspiring, but is it necessary? Does this really need to be said at this moment by you? Not because you think I want to say it, but because Jesus wants you to. Or should you just shut your mouth and not say anything at all? Helpful, inspiring, necessary, and finally, is it kind? Is what you're about to say kind? Or is it harsh? Is it gentle? Because the goal is pretty simple. The Bible lays it out very clearly in Psalm 19:14. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight.